So, good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Taylor. I am a Commercial Litigation Associate with DLA Piper and the Vice President of the Scottish Young Lawyers Association. I am absolutely delighted to be chairing tonight's event alongside my SYLA colleague, Brianella Scott. Brianella is an Assistant Solicitor to the Sheikh Bayou Public Inquiry and the Secretary of the SYLA. So thank you so much for joining us for the next instalment of the SYLA's widely attended So You Want to Be series, where tonight we'll be lending our focus to the promotion process, specifically being promoted to partner.
This evening, we're joined by an expert panel of speakers who will explore their respective journeys to partner. So the processes they followed, the standards and the milestones required to meet in advance of a promotion, their additional responsibilities and benefits of becoming a partner. We're pleased to welcome Tom Gray of Harper McLeod, Neil McLean of Brodie's, and Michaela Guthrie of Balfour Manson.
Thanks, Bree. So to kick off tonight's discussion, I'd first invite our speakers to tell us a little bit more about themselves and their careers to date. So a little bit about your day-to-day, the type of work you do, and any sort of extracurricular interest within the profession. So Tom, I'll come to you first, please.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Tom Gray from Harper McLeod. I'm based in the rural team here. In terms of my journey, I went to a local state school in Edinburgh, in Broomhouse. I studied at the University of Glasgow and then trained in Aberdeen for 2 years and then came back to Glasgow to join Harper McLeod in 2015. And I suppose I've done all the necessary kind of stages going from solicitor to associate, senior associate to partner within those 8 years. So hopefully I'm able to give a bit of a flavour of, I guess, how Harper McLeod do the promotion process. In terms of day to day, I guess it's one of those typical cliched things of no day is the same. I recently, focusing on farming and forestry acquisitions and sales, carbon credit agreements, which are now kind of the in vogue transaction. Recent highlight was acting for the Langham Community Group, which was the buyout of the Duke of Buccleuch's land in the Taras Valley, and that was to establish a nature reserve down there. So that was quite nice seeing kind of local empowerment and kind of community groups acquiring land for the greater good, I suppose. And from a personal point of view, excited about the summer coming up, because that means agricultural shows and getting out and about to all the various shows across Scotland. So that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to, I guess, giving a flavour of how Harper McLeod do the career progression aspects.
Thank you so much, Tom. And Neil, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, so I also studied at University of Glasgow, so pleased to see a fellow Glasgow graduate on the panel. I've been at Brodie's my entire career since I joined as a trainee in 2007. So I'm only going to be able to talk about the experience at Brodie's over the last 15 years or so. I've been a partner in the government regulation and competition practice at Brodie's since 2020. And the way I often sort of try and describe my practice is acting for or against government. So I've got a large kind of public sector client base, but obviously act for private sector clients as well. Primarily contentious work, so I'm within the dispute resolution part of Brodie's, but I do give obviously non-contentious advice to clients as well. Got particular experience acting for higher education clients and also within the local government sector, where I co-head our local government group. I also do the natural bedfellow to those sectors, which is defamation and media work. And like in a lot of firms, it just sits in a random part of the firm, but that's really varied and interesting work. So that means I'm really pleased to say that, as Tom said, that there's still a huge amount of variety in my practice, with no 2 days really being the same. One of my highlights, I think, was probably qualifying as a solicitor advocate. So I appear in the Court of Session fairly regularly, and that's one of the things the firm encourages us to do, particularly those who are interested in advocacy. And as part of that, that's led to me being a standing junior counsel to the Scottish Government, so appearing in court fairly regularly for the ministers as well. I'm ashamed to say I've got nothing extracurricular to report at the moment. I would love to be able to say I'm, a member of a whole bunch of committees, but I'm not. Well, I would encourage all of you to do so, because it is a very worthwhile thing to be doing at your stages in your career.
Thank you, Neil. I think you've got enough on your plate without any additional committees. And as Neil kind of touched upon there, when you were saying that you've worked for Brodie's your entire career, so you can talk about the process there. Whilst we appreciate that not everyone on tonight's call will work for Harper McLeod or Brodie's or Balfour and Manson, the event was pitched for those who are looking for promotion at a commercial firm. And from the similar events that we've run for associate and senior associate, there's definitely been common takeaways which will come out of tonight's event, or we think that they will. So hopefully there's some common takeaways for you all. And last but not least, Michaela.
Hi, thanks very much for having me this evening. My name is Michaela Guthrie. I'm a partner in the medical negligence and personal injury team at Balfour Manson. A little bit about my kind of journey to this point. I'm also state school educated. I went to high school in Aberdeenshire and then went to the University of Aberdeen for my diploma and my degree. And I've been a partner at Balfour Manson since November last year. So I'm a newbie. So don't ask me too many difficult questions about what being a partner involves. But the start of my career journey was at Balfour Manson. So I have also been at one firm for my whole career, which I'm delighted by. I absolutely love working at Balfour Manson. And I started as an admin assistant in the property department. And then I became a trainee and a solicitor, and then an associate, and then a senior associate, and now a partner. So I've not been there for very long. I started in 2014, which I suppose is nearly 10 years now, which is quite alarming. But I think I'm still technically a young lawyer, so that's something. But yes, I've worked in Procure medical negligence and personal injury since 2016, since I qualified. And even though that sounds like quite a narrow area of law, I do a huge variety of cases. So from quite simple, straightforward road traffic accidents up to quite complex. I'm not going to take that personally. I'm already being heckled off. Up to quite complex medical negligence cases as well. And I can see a former colleague of mine is now in the waiting room, so or in the audience, I should say. So she knows what it's all about. But yeah, so I do deal with some quite complex cases. So we're talking about recent highlights. So I just settled a case which had 11 pursuers. That was a fatal medical negligence claim. So that's quite a lot of juggling involved. And I think that's my record for pursuers in a case so far. And it is a really challenging area of work, but it's really rewarding. It's challenging, but it is very rewarding, both intellectually and emotionally as well. It's you're really doing good for people, and intellectually it's very stimulating as well, which is really good. And in terms of outside interests, I am involved with the Association of Personal Injury Lawyers, and I'm also accredited by them and by the Law Society. And that's definitely something that at my firm is really important, sort of as you're going through your training and getting more experience, becoming accredited and getting involved with whatever association governs the area of work that you're in. It can present some really interesting opportunities. So I'd echo what Neil said about getting involved with these sorts of things, because it can take you down all sorts of interesting avenues. But that's everything about me, I think. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michaela. You said you're a newbie, and we welcome newbies. I'm sure all of your insights will be just as invaluable to our listeners. In the interest of setting the scene of the partner process, I'd be grateful to understand what the process entailed at your respective firms. So, for example, was the matter raised during a meeting with your line manager? Was it something that you put yourself forward for example? At what stage of your PQE did you begin working towards the partner promotional goal? And did you have to complete an application or an interview For example, I'll go to Neil first.
Okay, thanks very much. I suppose the first thing I would say is that I've always wanted to be a partner at Brodie's. You know, I appreciate that not everyone's goal is to be a partner at the law firm that they work at, and we support all sorts of different career paths. But certainly my goal was always from when I started that I wanted to be a partner at the firm. The way that it works at Brodie's, I mean, we have a really structured annual appraisal process, which takes place annually at each stage of your career with certain sort of criteria that you're measured against, with performance indicators, and you set objectives every year aligned with those performance indicators. All of that does not sound very fun, does it? But it's actually a really focused way of mapping your development. And one of the things that it allows you to do is when you set yourself annual objectives, that you're able to align them with whatever your practice areas objectives are, and ultimately whatever the firm's objectives are. So, you know, to give you an example, a clear strategic objective of Brodie's dispute resolution practice was that we wanted to do more advocacy in-house. And so an obvious objective for me to set myself was to become a solicitor advocate, and then to be able to demonstrate how much revenue I would generate from being a solicitor advocate that otherwise would have been instructions that would have gone to the bar. I suppose I really began working towards partnership in earnest about 7 years PQE. I had obviously been trying to demonstrate all the behaviours of a partner up until that point, but really, you know, the focus into how I was going to get there about 7 years PQE. And one of the things that the firm actually did for me, which was really kind of them and really helped, was about a year out from applying, they organised a career coach for me. Now that really helped, I think, focus on the goal of partnership and how I was going to achieve it in a measurable way. So those kind of final sort of small steps that I could take to get me from being a really good senior associate, and obviously that sounds very self-congratulatory, but you're at that level and you're clearly a really good senior associate, but how do you take that sort of final step to partnership? So having kind of gone through that process, I've come to my appraisal with some really polished goals helped by that whole career coach, and looking at really kind of deeply at myself and what I wanted to achieve. You know, I raised up my appraisal, and my immediate sort of partners that I work with it within the government regulation competition team agreed that I was ready to go for partnership. And what then happens at Brodie's is you have to complete a business case. Now it will go through, I think, probably a painful amount of iterations for the lawyer involved, but it's a really great process because it tests your business case, tests the kind of the commercial reality of it, and gets you ready for the interview stage. So your business case has to first get out of your own immediate team, then it has to be approved by the entire practice area. So in my case, that's dispute resolution. And then you go through to be interviewed by the firm's strategic board. So that's the managing partner and other members of the strategic board. And once you've had that interview, it then ultimately goes to a vote of all of the partners at the firm to approve your partnership. So, I mean, all of that sounds pretty daunting and a long kind of process, but what I would say is that certainly I found that there was a huge amount of support available at each of those stages, both from people who'd gone through it before, and also from the partners that were supporting your business case, and also from our people engagement team. So, you know, it was a long process, but, you know, really rewarding ultimately.
Thank you so much, Neil. You mentioned your careers coach. It's definitely not something I've ever come across before, so interesting to hear that. I'm just going to move on now to Michaela.
Thanks very much. I think probably the process at Balfour Manson couldn't be much more different. We're quite unusual. We don't have a sort of formal process for progressing to partner. I don't know if that's maybe a size thing or what the reasoning is behind it, but I don't know if part of it as well is the fact that I have worked at Balfour Manson for my whole career. So I'm well known to all of the partners. I've probably worked for all of them in some capacity or other over the years. I've got a solid I had a solid track record of my performance over the years that I could point to in terms of my chargeable hours, my fees, and when I had become an associate and a senior associate, I did have to formally apply for those roles. And as part of that, I had to put together a business plan and a business case as to why I should be promoted and why the firm should be investing in me, and what return on their investment they would get. And that was something that I had to update annually, and I still update now. And it was really good for focusing my mind as to what I could offer the firm and how my progression within the firm would benefit the firm ultimately, because that's a big part of the whole progression process. So I, like Neil, I'm very fortunate that my line manager was very good at doing constructive appraisals that were really detailed and in-depth and really focused on how things are going, but also how can we improve things, and what are my targets going to be, and coming up with sort of challenging but also achievable targets. So not these absolutely horrifying targets that give you nightmares and sleepless nights and things like that. So they were challenging and designed to keep me progressing and keep me moving forward and improving year on year in terms of the service that I was providing to clients, but also my levels of experience and expertise. So getting accredited and becoming more specialized, and basically just trying to improve my sell, trying to what would bring clients in with a view to working towards partnership. So I started thinking seriously about wanting to be a partner at 6 years PQE. So a question I always dreaded at appraisal time, and when I was applying for traineeships, was if anyone asked me what my 5-year plan was, because my plan leaving university was just to get a traineeship. There weren't a lot of jobs at that point, so I didn't have a sort of huge plan for the future. I was very sort of short-term focused, and I kind of wish maybe looking back, I'd been a bit more focused on the long term, but it's all worked out in the end. And I think, yeah, the question of what do you see next for your career always used to sort of make me quite nervous. And it wasn't until, and I think there's other questions coming up to talk about, how did we, what sort of things did we do to get ourselves ready to become partners? And as I worked through all the different levels of expertise and experience, I started to think, actually, that is something that I think I would be able to do, and I would be a good partner. But once I decided that was something I did want to do, I met with my line manager, my supervising partner, who I've got a really good working relationship with, and she's a great support and an inspiration to me. So I had a meeting with her and with our HR director, and I kind of gave them my thoughts about where I saw my career going. And luckily that lined up with the career trajectory that they had in mind for me as well. And things moved quite quickly from there. So yeah, the main thing I think was actually me putting forward what I wanted to do, and then, actually discussing that with the right people. And that's not something I've traditionally been very good at. And I think a lot of people are a bit nervous about actually vocalizing what they want to do. So that's a tip I would sort of put out to you all, that if you're interested in becoming a partner, you need to actually tell people that that's what you want to do. But yeah, sorry, I can't add too much to that because we have such a sort of informal process, but we still do have the kind of common themes of, thorough appraisals and putting your intentions out there and working towards achieving that goal. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Michaela. You've kind of reiterated what Neil said there along the lines of intentionality, as well as putting some forethought into it and realizing when that step would be best after having discussions, ongoing discussions and support. So that's good to know. Thank you. Just going to move on to Tom now.
Yeah, it's really interesting how Michaela and Neil's perhaps experiences differ quite substantially, one extreme to the other. Harper McLeod is fairly formal, and it's based on, again, our annual reviews, which is referred to as the balanced scorecard. It's essentially a system whereby you're assessed on an A to E level, A being outstanding, C being you're meeting your expectations, and E needing improvement. So each year, every member of staff, regardless of whether you're a partner, whether you're a paralegal, whether you're a TA, an assistant, you complete these scorecards. They are filtered down from a firm scorecard down to a department, all the way down to a trainee or a solicitor. And you use what's called skills and behaviors. It's a spreadsheet or a chart that's on the intranet for everyone to see, and it lists what the skills and behaviors are expected of each, I'll just use the word rank, solicitor, senior solicitor, and onwards. And the changes are quite distinct. The behaviors that you'll see in a partner or somebody who's expecting to be a partner are, high level expectations. For example, creating business, being the lead contact for either a client or a series of clients, leading a team in a sector, for example. And then, for example, solicitors' skills and behaviors could be, attending department meetings and client seminars, or attending client meetings. Still, fairly daunting prospects for a newly qualified solicitor or a trainee, but the levels are quite distinct. The balanced scorecard is used heavily when people are looking to go for any promotion, but focusing on partner level, they are, I guess, the building blocks, because you're able to then look back at 2, 3, 4 years worth of balanced scorecards to see the progression, to see that you've hit targets consistently over each year. It's slightly more challenging for somebody coming in, say, from another firm as an associate or senior associate and only having, say, a handful. But again, that's quite a niche thing to happen, to have somebody come in and then become partner within, say, a year or two. But in terms of my own ambitions, I think I was always, and I wonder what the rest of the participants feel, or whether this resonates, I was always much more interested in the business side of a law firm, the way that it works, the way that you're able to generate business from clients, retaining clients, that relationship, rather than perhaps the academic nitty gritty of the law. That might say more about my personality than anything else. So ever since I was a trainee, I was focusing on climbing the ladder, so to speak, and getting to partnership, because at partner level, you're able to make changes. You're able to perhaps change the direction of a sector, a team, a department, the firm, in a way when you get up to senior partner level. And that always certainly interested me, rather than just being perhaps a cog in the wheel. You want to perhaps be able to shift where the machine is going, so to speak. It sounds quite grandiose, but that's just, I guess, how my brain works. So in terms of Harper McLeod, it is not a tap on the shoulder, you play golf at the same golf course as I play. It's very, very transparent. All applications are presented to the partnership group for partner. They have to go through a process of a primary supporter, a seconder. It goes up to interview level. You're interviewed by 2 independent partners within the firm, with not, out with your department or your stream, so to speak. The management committee, which is formed of 7 partners, senior partners, then decides whether it's a yay or a nay, and it's presented to the partnership group, as I say. At which point you're then invited to either accept or reject. You don't necessarily have to accept, and there are various capital contributions that have to be made at that point. And then you are accepted into the partnership group, I suppose. So that's a whistle-stop tour. I'm sure I've missed a lot out, but I think main takeaway is it's very transparent. There can be very little accusation of favoritism, very little accusation of discriminatory behaviors, that sort of thing. And that's, I think, mainly why we do it. Gone are the days of kind of the pals get in and the rest have to put up with not being part of the partnership.
Thank you so much, Tom and Neil and Michaela. That was really helpful. And I think that transparency element is really reassuring for applicants, whatever the firm. We've kind of touched upon this when we mentioned targets that had to be met. But at your firms, is there a particular set of criteria that must be met before you're eligible to be promoted to partner? And if so, could you please describe the criteria and your experience of meeting it? And I'll come to Michaela first, please.
Thanks. So I think probably in terms of we don't have formal criteria. I think that's probably not surprising based on my answer to the last question. And I'd be interested to hear what the other people on the panel, what their experiences of having probably quite formal and quite clear criteria. But I think I did mention that I've had, I've been really fortunate to have a great mentor and a great supervisor who over the years, she gave me very thorough appraisals and she gave me a really clear idea of what it takes to be a good manager, and that is something that's really important at Balfour Manson. So we're not a huge firm and we do work in quite small teams. And so a huge part of being a partner is, being able to manage a small team of people. So leadership and management skills and expertise is really important. And that's been something that's been a part of my progression all the way through my time at Balfour Manson. So as part of my promotion to senior associate, I took on the responsibility of training one of the trainees in our team. And at that time, it was sort of just purely ensuring all of their Law Society compliance was met. And then over time, that kind of gradually morphed into becoming more of a kind of mentoring and day-to-day supervision kind of relationship. And then over time, I took on supervising another trainee. And so in that way, my kind of role developed, and it was made very clear to me that that was something that I would be expected to do. So there's the kind of management on a wider level of being a partner and being involved in making decisions and going to the partners meetings and voting on things. But then on a sort of more team level, there was an expectation that I'd be involved in managing people at all different levels and different stages. And as I've become a partner, I'm now getting more involved in supervising the solicitor and the associate in the team as well. Which has been a bit of a challenge, and it's a very different experience to the kind of very rigid training structure that you have with a trainee. And Tom had said that he was very interested in the business side of running a law firm. I traditionally, probably up to this point, was more interested in the nitty-gritty legal stuff, and probably part of that is the kind of cases that I do. So I do a lot of legal aid work, a lot of spec work. So I'm not in this sort of like monthly churn of billing and cash flow and all of this stuff. So I think for me, a big part of preparing myself for becoming a partner and the firm preparing me to become a partner was getting me a bit more financially literate, to be totally honest. I think the thing that I really enjoy about my job is I really enjoy the legal work. I really enjoy being completely baffled by all of the ways that your body can go wrong and all of the ways you can be mangled in horrible accidents. And I really enjoy that side of my work. And so starting to learn a bit more about cash flow and lockup and WIP management and all of these things, that was something that I really had to, and I was encouraged by the firm to learn more about it and go on courses and undertake CPD to learn about that side of things, because it's hugely important once you become more senior, and especially once you're a partner. That's the side of the business that I think I'd maybe been not avoiding, that's probably a bit of a strong word, but it definitely wasn't the thing that I enjoyed most about my job. And I've talked about sort of people management. That's the other side of being a partner that I'm really interested in. And again, sort of undertaking CPD and learning more about managing people and what it takes to be a good manager. That was something else that I was really encouraged to do by my firm. So yeah, I think learning more about the financial side and deepening my understanding of the business and how the business works and how we're profitable, that was a big thing that I was encouraged to learn more about, and I would encourage everyone to do it. It doesn't come naturally to me, but that was why I really wanted to push myself to actually learn about it and not just say, oh well, we've got a financial director, he understands it all. It's really important that we all understand it at every level as well.
Thank you so much, Michaela. That's really helpful. Neil, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, of course. So if we're talking about things that make that make you eligible to be promoted to partner. So we obviously talked about all the kind of criteria in the appraisal process already. And one of the questions that's asked of every prospective partner is, how do you demonstrate the firm's values? So we ask that question of internal promotion candidates, but also external lateral hires from other firms, because it's really fundamentally important to us as a firm that we have people at partner level that demonstrate the firm's core values. So we agreed on those as a firm. There are 5: courage, character, care, collaborative, and being collegiate. Those are the 5 values, but it's at the heart of everything that we do. So if you can't demonstrate in your business case how you demonstrate those values with your colleagues, then you won't be a partner at Brodie's. You know, by the time you reach partners, it's kind of generally accepted that you will be technically excellent in your chosen area of practice. So if the focus at partnership level is less on demonstrating that, you know, that's more of a thing you need to demonstrate as you're coming through a senior solicitor associate level. By the time you get to partner, the understanding will be that you're capable of doing the day-to-day work to the highest possible standard, and you'll be involved in all of the complex things and will continue to be involved in them. What you have to demonstrate as a partner, and this kind of echoes what both Tom and Michaela have said, is how are you going to take those skills and demonstrate a commercial understanding of running a business? So how are you going to demonstrate that you are able to use those skills, leverage them, and act in a way that's consistent with the firm's strategic goals? Now, every law firm represented in this panel will have as one of its strategic aims to grow the business. I mean, that's what commercial law firms are all about. They're all about increasing their revenue, increasing the number of clients, and doing an excellent job for those clients. So it's fundamentally important that as soon as possible, you think about the commercial aspects of being a law firm and understand how those feed into strategy. So, for example, the firm you're in may decide that it's no longer going to do a particular type of work because it's no longer profitable for the firm, or the firm can't compete with other firms that provide the same service. So you've got to recognise that those sorts of strategic decisions should always be in your mind, as is working in a profitable way. So again, most commercial law firms will make decisions based on how profitable work is. So there's no point in doing work if ultimately the firm is going to lose money on it, unless there is a clear strategic reason for that approach. For example, you're breaking into a new market and you're going to you want to expand in that market, so you've taken a strategic decision. So thinking strategically is really important. And if you're not a natural of it, and I'd probably place myself somewhere in between Tom and Michaela in terms of that. I mean, I'm certainly much better at it now, and I've been doing it as a partner for a few years, but you really got to push yourself in that, because by the time you reach partnership, I would say, and this maybe isn't the same in every firm, but it's less about your technical ability and more about how that fits with strategic goals and making a commercial law firm work.
Thank you so much, Neil. And Tom, come to you now.
Yeah, I totally agree with Neil there. In terms of the evolution from, say, associate, senior associate, and moving towards partner, it's the main aspect for me, and how I think the focus should be is building the business and client, and all the other aspects will fall in place. So in terms of, I touched on skills and behaviors in the previous question, but again, it ties in with that transparency. Everyone knows what is expected of senior solicitor, associate, senior associate, partner. Right from day one of joining the firm, it's part of the induction. You can see exactly what you should expect from your partners and what partners should expect for you coming through the business. And that's good and bad, because quite frankly, you can't hide from failing to meet an objective or a skill or behavior, because it's written in black and white. This is the expectation. Now, there are probably ways that you can focus on the wins, the easy wins, perhaps, in terms of skills and behaviors, and those things could include, from a junior stage solicitor or senior solicitor, increasing your contact group, going out to meet those agents. And I can only speak to, me in a kind of agricultural property point of view. I can't talk about litigation or how you would grow a network there, but going out to meet agents, going out to conferences, attending seminars like this, it's getting your face out there, not because you want a brand yourself or because you want to be seen. It's creating those links and those contacts that you can kind of just keep in touch with over the course of 3, 4, 5 years. And you'll notice that after 5 years, when you're trying to push ahead to partner, that's when those contacts start paying off. That's when somebody approaches saying, we met at that conference a year ago. Do you want to have a coffee and discuss this client, this problem I've got? And that's where you're able to then pop that into your interview. You pop that into the application process and you can be seen very easily. That's how I'm growing the business, from a very obvious way. And I guess from, the experience of meeting the criterias, there will be times that you don't meet the criteria. And there are certainly times whereby an application is declined. It happens every year that perhaps the applicant is just not quite ready, partner or otherwise. And they're asked politely to, focus on these aspects, focus on these skills and behaviors, come back next year and we'll do the process again. And it's not a negative, it should be seen as just a growth kind of exercise. But it's very important that the kind of, again, I keep on banging on about transparency, but you can see exactly what you need to work on. It's not just, no, it's not this year. The face doesn't fit or something like that. You can see what you need to work on. And more often than not, those aspects are worked on and the process continues. So it's a work in progress right from day one in terms of going and working towards partner. You have to create the reasons for you being invited to the partnership right from day one.
Thank you so much, Tom. We touched on this briefly as well earlier. If you had to complete an interview, what was the format of the interview? And what sort of questions were you asked, or what sort of questions does your firm ask? Neil mentioned there about values, specific values that you might have. And do you have any tips for getting the most out of an interview? I'll come to Neil first.
Thank you very much. When I was thinking about this question, I realized that the only interviews I've had in the last 20 years have all been at Brodie's, which is pretty sad, isn't it? But actually, I mean, I had to be interviewed to become an associate at Brodie's and also a senior associate, and then ultimately a partner. I also, quite sadly, I really enjoy interviews because I like the intellectual challenge of them. But the serious point is, I suppose, having gone through that process at associate and senior associate level, I'd been kind of testing the same sorts of answers to questions that I knew I was ultimately going to get at partner, because what happens at Brodie's is, and again, consistent with Tom said, you've got criteria that you're working to at each level, and they differ depending on what level you're at. But what happens is the focus on the commercial questions increases at each stage. So at associate, you're probably focusing more on your technical skills, and you're saying a bit about the kind of business development work you're doing. So you're talking about, as Tom said, the conferences you've attended, who's in your network, how you're kind of building that network. By senior associate, you're talking about, how that network is now actually starting to deliver work to you. So you've met people and you've formed relationships with people at clients who will instruct you direct on things. Now, the firm is realistic. It's not expecting at that stage for you to be saying, I've got £1 million client and they give me all their work. I mean, that's just not realistic, or at least not for most people. But what you're doing at that point is you're kind of demonstrating that progression, that you now understand networks are important. And by partner, it's the same sort of questions, only by that point, you probably are going to be able to point to clients that you are responsible for the client relationship, and you probably can say fairly, and you've always got to be sensitive about your fellow partners, or your soon-to-be fellow partners, about that relationship sits with you, and you've worked really hard to develop it and are now seeing the benefits of it. So, I was fortunate in the sense that I had kind of gone through that process and each time learned a bit about how to approach an interview and talk about my practice in a commercial way, and had refined the way that I talked about it. The other thing I suppose I would say is that you should be able to speak confidently about your practice and what you want to achieve with it by the time you're going to be a partner, because if you can't explain it in an interview, how are you going to explain it to a client or prospective client that you meet? How are you going to explain it to a colleague that's looking for leadership from you in terms of what's required at the firm in terms of service delivery and client care? So you should be able to speak confidently about it. The one kind of tip I suppose I would give, thinking about those kind of commercial elements, is you do need to kind of test what you say commercially and ensure it sort of stands up to scrutiny. And also, if your firm has strategic plans that you can see, always look at those in advance and think about your answers and align them with what strategically your firm wants to do. So if your firm has, for example, made a decision that is consciously going to grow, for example, its English litigation practice, think about, and if you're a litigation lawyer, think about ways in which you can contribute to that growth. The flip side is also, important. If your firm has said that it's pulling out of a particular sector or practice area for strategic reasons, you obviously don't want to talk about how you're going to revive that or how you're going to contribute to that practice, because that doesn't align with the firm's strategic objectives. And I suppose the final tip is, you're going to be pressed quite hard on this sort of stuff at an interview, particularly at associate, senior associate, and partner, and it gets tougher at partner level. So don't overreach. Don't say that you want to work for a particular client and you will generate £100,000 of revenue from that client if you know that realistically they have a very strong relationship with another firm, that they may never move to Brodie's in our case, or they may never move to Harper McLeod because of that relationship, or if the work is, for example, tendered and it's a work that you have to bid for and win, then you can't achieve that objective without winning the work first. So you could talk about your long-term plan of acting for that client, but really focus on areas where you can point to, I suppose, easy wins immediately, and then think about the long-term strategy. Because often I think when people are told that it's not quite the time or not ready, it's because they haven't really thought through those commercial or strategic points.
Thank you so much, Neil. That was really helpful. I'll just move on to Tom next, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll keep it fairly brief, because I think the majority of us on this call will have been well versed in interview process, but the interview process is pot luck, because you can either get very relaxed, very kind of conversational partners who want to investigate and look at the business plan and try and see where it works for the firm. Alternatively, you can have fairly uncomfortable interviews that really kind of dig deep into your objectives, the reasons why you're wanting to progress within the firm, perhaps even instances throughout your career that you need to speak to looking back 2 or 3 years ago. That can happen as well. So it can go either way, and I think we just need to remember how to best kind of address that, be very direct, try and answer the questions that are being asked. Don't try and circumvent. You must kind of just directly answer the questions. Focus on the wins. Try and, if you're, another, I guess, tip is, if you are asked about an incident, regardless, a risk incident or something that's perhaps gone wrong, you've got to be willing to kind of hold your hands up, evidence how you worked a solution, how you implemented a solution to the satisfaction of the client and or the firm. There's no good, kind of trying to deflect blame if it's kind of raised at an interview process. You're always respected more for having broad shoulders and taking it on the chin, so long as a solution is presented. And I think finally, as Neil says, it's business plan focused. It's how you are going to grow the business it's how you're going to affect the team in a positive way, grow, that sort of thing. And that's the kind of main focuses from my point of view.
Thank you, Tom. And last but not least, Michaela.
Thank you. Again, yeah, I don't want to kind of reiterate too much of what's already been said, but I think a big thing from my perspective was a big part of my job is being very specialized and expanding your skill set. And as you become more qualified and more experienced, you are expected to have a greater understanding of not just kind of the immediate issues of a case that you're looking at in front of you, but the wider implications and how it fits in with the law generally and the direction that the law is going in, and also tactically and things. So a big part of my promotion process was about how I was going to show that I was becoming more specialized and more skilled. And so just to sort of expand on what everyone else has said, was looking at getting accredited and looking at all of those processes, and sitting in an interview and saying, why should the firm be investing in that? Because it is expensive to go through these accreditation processes, and it can take a lot of time out of your day. Instead of, you could be doing chargeable work, but instead you're submitting applications and going through all those processes. So I suppose my main tip is look at where you can add value, and if it is going to cost the firm for you to go down a particular process, then you need to be able to show the value of that. And if you have figures to support what you're saying, then work out the finances, work out the business case, and actually have the evidence to demonstrate it. Because it's very easy to sit and say, as everyone else has said already, it's quite easy to say, yeah, I'm going to make squillions for the firm and that's why you should make me a partner. But it's much more impressive to actually say, I can increase my fee income by this amount by going and doing a particular thing, by going to get accredited. That will help me do X, Y, Z, and that will mean I'll be able to bring in this much more money. The big one with getting accredited is that you can charge more. So things like that, if you can actually, say why being a partner and why all of the particular things that you want to do, how that's going to benefit the firm, and actually having a financial business case for that, and having the facts and the figures to back it up. Because it is, as I say, it's easy to say things, but I think once you get to partner level, it is a bit more about how you're actually going to deliver, and how you're going to increase benefit and productivity and all of these things. It's all about actually demonstrating that once you become a partner, and it's a big part of the interview process, or it was for me anyway.
Thank you so much, Michaela, and Neil and Tom as well for sharing such helpful and indeed practical tips to take forward. We've kind of touched on our next question already, albeit briefly, when we've discussed mentorship and running a team and burrowing deeper into the financials and growing the business. But how has your role changed and developed since becoming a partner, and what new responsibilities have you had to take on? And for you, what are the key benefits of that? And before I come to Tom first, I just wanted to say this is our second last question, everyone. So if you have any questions for our panel, please do feel free to pop them in the chat box, or at the very end, we'll open the floor to questions and you can ask your questions to the panel directly. But Tom, I'll come to you first for that question, please.
Okay. Actually, in terms of day-to-day, from senior associate to partner, there isn't actually that much difference for me. The team is growing, so I'm line managing a couple more people. We're trying to hire some more newly qualified solicitors as well. So we're just trying to grow the team. I'm much more involved in the management of the rural team as well. Earlier this year, the team split from a wider department due to the growth. So there's a lot more kind of admin of goals, targets, monthly meetings, that sort of thing, keeping client referral lists up to date. And that's really just managing that aspect more than anything. But I think in terms of key benefits, I touched on it earlier in the seminar about you have perhaps more investment in the business. You have a greater sense that perhaps suggestions or new ideas are perhaps more openly received. I definitely feel that is the case. You're able to put in place targets, goals for your specific sector group in a way that perhaps you weren't able to prior to partnership. And I guess the other aspect, it'd be remiss of me not to get kind of down and dirty with financial, reward, but I think quite a few participants would be interested in that being touched on. And quite frankly, there is a significant difference between being an employee of a firm and being a partner. And it'd be remiss of me to not mention that. So that is there. The reward is significantly different. However, the expectations are far greater. You are expected to bring in X amount of clients, X amount of business. So the pressure is ramped up as well as the reward. So it's it's sweet and sour.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for your candor. Michaela, I'll come to you next, please.
I think probably I've already touched on my financial illiteracy. So the biggest thing for me probably was having to learn about pensions, which is quite horrifying. And I really appreciated the sort of neat stowing away of a little bit of money every month by the firm. It was quite nice. So that's, for me, that is just a practical challenge that I've had to work out, and meeting accountants and working out about tax returns and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's a big part of my life that has now changed, but for the better. And as Tom said, it is financially very lucrative being a partner, but the expectations are higher, and that you have to hit your fee target because you need to justify why you're getting that financial remuneration, and you need to be bringing in clients, you need to be out there being a representative for the firm, and the expectations are a lot higher. Again, like Tom, I think by the time I'd gotten to this point, I already had supervisory responsibilities. I was already kind of expected to be working independently, and sort of being at Balfour Manson for my whole career and working through all the different stages that we have. I've experienced the kind of gradual decrease in close supervision from my boss, and then an increase in responsibility. So it wasn't a massive shock to the system becoming a partner. It's a bit more about, you just get a lot more information about what is going on in the firm, and a bit more, you're included in decision making, you're included in discussions, you can put your opinions out there, and you can express what you want to happen. And that does also bring with it a whole other array of interpersonal relationships that you didn't know about, and different different departments having different motivations and different ways of working. And it's really interesting getting to see how all of that interplays in terms of the actual management of the firm. So yeah, having a voice and not being scared to speak up, and realizing that when you're in a partners meeting, you are expected to say something, and you can't just go, oh, I agree with everyone else. You actually have to have ideas, and you can push things forward, and you can get involved with the different committees. And if there is a particular, we have lots of committees and subcommittees and things within the firm. So if there is something that particularly interests you, then you can go down that route and be really involved in shaping the direction of the firm. And that's really exciting. A bit daunting when you first start out, but it's exciting to know that you can be involved in shaping all of that.
Thank you, Michaela. It does sound really exciting how influential the role can be. And Neil.
Yep, so I'm going to keep my answer really brief because I'm absolutely desperate to get on to the final tips for budding partners in the audience. I've one I'm always keen to get across. So I mean, my experience has been really consistent with what Michaela and Tom have said. Obviously, increased responsibility. You do sometimes feel the burden of keeping people busy and being ultimately responsible for bringing in the work that keeps your entire team productive. And it can be quite stressful when people look to you all the time to give them work to do, and knowing that that's your job. So I don't underestimate or would want people to underestimate how that can feel. But obviously, there are loads of benefits to being a partner. I'm unashamedly passionate about Brodie's and its values, and obviously, I think it's a great place to be. So I'm proud to be a partner at the firm and get to see the firm's strategy, take part in that strategy, but also really get to see colleagues can develop and grow on their own career journeys, and look to support them as much as they can, or as I can rather. So that's all I wanted to say, because I am quite keen to get on to the final tips.
Thank you so much, Neil. Spoiler alert from Neil there. Now you know what the final question is going to be, which is, do you have some final tips for any budding partners in the audience? I will start off with Neil.
Oh, it's funny you should ask that, Brian, because I have been thinking about this question. The one thing I want to get across, I want everybody to take away from this session is, do not be deterred by other people being promoted or your firm hiring other people that do the same job as you. I cannot stress that enough. For Tom, Michaela, and me, when we joined our respective firms, there were people above us who did the same job as us. Your firm wants you to be ambitious. So what you have to do is to demonstrate how you're going to complement those colleagues. And that might mean doing what they're already doing to grow the business. So you could do exactly the same work as them, but grow it to a scale where it now needs 2 partners rather than 1. That's the kind of level of ambition that you need to show. Or you can do something that's slightly different, and you can plug a niche that others are not filling. But what you can't be is deterred about the fact that somebody else has been brought in. You know, for a firm to grow, it'll do 2 things. It will promote its own people, but it'll also hire in other people that do similar sorts of work. So don't let that deter you. Don't spend time worrying about how many people are above you or how long it's going to take you to get there. You've got to focus on what you can control and what you can contribute to your firm, and ultimately what you can achieve with your career. Because if you do those things, the rest should hopefully take care of itself.
Thank you, Neil. That was really helpful. I'm going to move on to Michaela now. Thank you.
Well, like Neil, I was very excited about this part of the talk, so I have a list of tips, but I'll do one just now. But I think kind of following on from what Neil said, I was given some good advice. So when I was a trainee and me and my boss were sort of scheming about whether I could stay on in the team once I qualified, something she did say to me, it stuck with me, and I say it to trainees now when I'm supervising them and doing their PQPRs, is don't hide your light under a bushel. I had to look up what it meant when she said it to me. But basically, if there's something that you want, or if you want to be considered for something, or if you want people to see you in a particular role in the future, you have to tell people and you have to communicate that. And, you know, like Neil said, I mean, a big motivator for me actually starting to think about being promoted was that I was seeing other people around my age and stage starting to be promoted. And I realized that the only person really who could set all of this in motion and make it all happen was me. And through me speaking to the right people and starting, and not in a sort of nepotistic way, I mean, but in terms of letting people know what my intentions were and what my plans were for the future, and starting to find out, well, what do I need to do to get promoted, and what do I need to do to be seen? Because I think there's a bit of a tendency sometimes where if you're quietly getting on with your work and you're not putting yourself forward and you're not saying what you actually want to happen in your career, then people will sometimes just assume that you're happy with where you are and that you don't necessarily want to move on to the next stage. So I would always encourage people to be upfront with what they want and always be looking to the next step and thinking, well, what do I need to do to get there, and speak up. And my other tip, just to sort of, I'm kind of segueing into it, is to try and find yourself a mentor. I've spoken about having a mentor a few times. Find yourself a mentor, find someone that you can go to talk about problems that you've got, or if you see someone that you would like to emulate, you know, their career that you would like to emulate, then, you know, speak to that person, see if they will mentor you. It doesn't need to be a formal relationship, you know, as in we will meet this many times a month and we will talk about this. Just having someone there that, you know, inspires you and gives you just a vision for how you see your career developing. It's really, really important. And if you don't have that within your firm or within your team, then I think the Law Society has a mentoring program. A lot of the professional bodies have it. So the Association for Personal Injury Lawyers, they have a mentoring program. You might not necessarily be with someone in your city even, but it's something, and it's really, really important having a good mentor. And I think that kind of followed on from my first point, and I haven't just hijacked this whole session. But I'll stop talking now. I'll let Tom deliver one of his tips now. But those are my big ones.
Thank you, Michaela. Moving on now to Tom. I'm sure you've got some amazing tips as well.
Well, I'll focus on two because Neil and Michaela have really touched on some really, really key points there. 2 points for me. One is we've touched on it before, the building the business, grinding away at your network. I remember a vivid memory for me in my traineeship was the HR and marketing guys came round and they were doing a British Heart Foundation ceremony, presenting them a check. And the guy who was supposed to be in the big red heart-shaped costume hadn't turned up. And they said, is anyone able to do it? I'm straight up, I'm in there. If there was a slideshow, I'd show you the picture of me in this heart outfit. But the reason I say that is because really, as a young solicitor, junior solicitor, you really should be jumping at every opportunity that anyone offers you in a business sense. There shouldn't be any fear of embarrassment or awkwardness or it's too ambitious, etc., etc. You should just jump at the opportunities that anyone gives you. And then another aspect from a personal point of view, and there'll be a lot of participants here that are either young men or women who are looking to have families. I have 2 young children. Throughout my employment, I have worked flexibly, dropping them off at school, picking them up from school. This Harper McLeod are very, very on board with giving that flexibility, and it's not stopped me from going to partnership. And that shouldn't, having children or wanting a family should not be a hurdle or an obstacle to anyone in this room or the wider, solicitor community. It's really almost encouraged, and firms now are taking big steps to try and accommodate and try and get that flexible working right for parents. So I just wanted to touch on that as well, because it's a bit of something that some people might be a bit concerned about.
Thanks, Tom. I think that was a really reassuring and encouraging way to end the session tonight. I know I've come across a lot of my colleagues that definitely ask the question from the perspective of, well, if I choose to have kids, will this kind of delay that kind of partner track that I'm on? So I really appreciate you mentioning that, and also being a woman from a gender equity point of view as well. It's good to know that firms are being active when it comes to those sort of things as well.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Thank you all so much. Do we have any questions from our audience? I think you've just covered everything so thoroughly. Well, if there's no questions on behalf of... do you have a question?
One's come into our mailbox, and it's along the lines of, in your opinion, are you more likely to become a partner if you stay in the same firm for years, or if you, or will it affect you and your position if you move around?
Good question.
I'll start with Neil, I think.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I mean, it's difficult for me obviously to answer, because I did stay in the same place, and obviously the advantage of doing that is you're able to kind of build your network internally. I mean, obviously our firm is fairly large, so there's loads of sources of work internally, and you have the support to build your network externally as well. So that is a definite advantage. It allows you to see a clear track progression, provided of course you're supported at each stage to do that. And I think probably part of the reason people move around is they feel that there are better opportunities elsewhere, or they're not being supported in their current position. You've also got to think very carefully about that. I mean, it can be done. I mean, obviously, if you have a great practice and a network of people that you've worked at one firm, and you're able to maintain that network at another firm, then you can do it. Or you can, I mean, the thing I would say, the piece of advice I would give is that don't move around for moving's sake to get sort of better terms and conditions. Think about it strategically, and have a frank conversation before you'd move to another firm as to what the expectations are when you're going to join. Because if you can identify that actually, go back to the point I made earlier, if what that firm wants to do is that it wants to grow its practice to a place where there are going to be, it needs 2 partners, you have that conversation, and just think carefully about it, because a bit of cliche, but the grass isn't always greener at another place.
Thanks, Neil. Tom, Michaela, do you have anything to add?
I think the only thing I would say is I finished up my traineeship. I moved to a firm and left after 5 months, and was worried that, have I made my CV a blacklist? Have I ruined my reputation by simply not staying with the same firm for 3, 4, 5 years? And the answer is very much no. I think everyone in our sector will see CVs sometimes littered with firms for reasons of location, reasons of moving for better terms and conditions, for a variety of reasons. And I don't think anyone would put that against someone unless it looked as if it was a recurring habit. So 3 or 4 firms, and every year or 18 months somebody moves. You kind of have to think to yourself, what's the reason? So I guess in answer to the question, I think it's for partnership level, there shouldn't be a black mark on somebody's record for having moved into a firm or it switched about firms. It's purely, I think, based on the things that we've spoken about today.
Yeah, I think I'd probably, again, I have worked at the same firm for my entire career. But when I look at the partners that we have at Balfour Manson, there's a real mix of people who have, like me, been a trainee at the firm and have worked their way up to partner. People who have come over from other firms, they were a partner in their old firm and now they're a partner with us. People who have, started with us as associates or senior associates and worked their way up. So we have a real mixture. And I think particularly since COVID, I think moving around is not that unusual. And if you're moving to find better terms and conditions, we're quite an old established Edinburgh firm. And for a long time, it was quite a source of pride for us that we, the majority of our staff had worked with us for over 25 years, support staff and right up to the chairperson of the firm. And, since COVID, we've had a lot of people who've come into the firm who are completely new to us, and it's all about fitting in with the firm ethos and kind of having the right motivations and the right drives to make things succeed. And I think it is about your personality and about whether you fit in with the firm. And Neil was talking about the values of Brodie's and how important it is to fit in with that. And it's definitely the case at Balfour Manson. And I know people that have moved around a lot in other firms, and they've gone on to become partners and things like that. So it's not necessarily a black mark. I think, as Tom said, unless there's some sort of suspicious pattern going on. But we've had people join us who have worked at a different firm every so often, and you think, well, that's a bit of a funny pattern. But then you look at wider business issues, and firms do close down nowadays, and firms do make people redundant, and people move on through no fault of their own. So I don't think it is necessarily a barrier anymore. Maybe in the olden days, but not anymore.
Thank you very much. I think that's really reassuring. We've actually had one more question come in directly. So given we all tend to specialise in one area of law, is it important to work across different disciplines in order to be visible? And if so, do you have any tips on how to do this? I'll just open the floor.
I think, Tom's experience of dressing up was a big cuddly heart. It's quite a good way, but it's as a trainee, for example, at my firm, there would be an email sent to all the trainees saying, can someone go and do some such and such? And as a trainee, I always leapt at that sort of thing because it was interesting and it might get you out of the office for a little while or something like that. But it was really, really good to learn about different departments, and not just the kind of day-to-day of what their work is, but it gives you quite an insight into how different departments actually work and how they function. And something I was quite keen to do as a trainee, and as much as I could after I qualified, was get experience of different departments. And I think I always had quite a fixed idea of what I wanted to do when I grew up. So when I was at university, and then when I was doing the diploma and a trainee, And my idea of what I wanted to do changed all the time. So I'm quite glad that when I was a trainee and once I qualified, I did have the opportunity to try lots of different things. And I think it pays off once you become a partner, because you understand all of the different departments and you understand the different challenges that they face. And I think it's really important to get that breadth of expertise. And even though I can't remember how to write a disposition, I can't remember how to do a bounding description, I think that's what it's called. I can't remember all of that, but I can remember the transferable skills from all of those different seats. And I think that's what's really important. So I would encourage people at every level to get as much knowledge, and also it helps with cross-selling. It helps you sell the firm to clients and things as well. So I'd really encourage people at every stage to learn about all the different departments of their firms and get as much experience as you can.
Thank you, Michaela. Neil, Tom, anything to add?
No, I don't think I've anything I can usefully add to that. No, I agree with everything that Michaela has said there.
I think the only thing I would add just very briefly is I think in terms of getting that exposure to other departments, nobody, I don't think, will ever say no to you asking, would you mind if I sat in on a department meeting? Would you mind if I sat in on that weekly WIP report? Because it allows you to see what other departments are working on. You're then able to feed back to your department, your team, and it just frankly shows that you're interested in the wider business. And again, it's just a tick in the box.
Thank you, Tom. And I suppose it shows as well that you're working together, as Michaela said, cross-departmentally, and you're interested in how those other teams are growing their business too, for the wider good of the firm. So thank you so much. If there's no further questions, it's just left to me to say on behalf of SYLA and myself and Brianella, thank you so much to our panelists, Tom, Neil and Michaela, for joining us this evening, and of course to our members for your engagement with this event. I have learned a lot, and although partnership is a long while away, I feel slightly more prepared for when the time comes. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.